The Ibanez Tube Screamer is an overdrive pedal made by Ibanez. The pedal has a characteristic mid-boosted tone popular with blues and rock players. The legendary Tube Screamer has been used by countless guitarists to create their signature sound, and is one of the most successful, widely copied, and modded overdrive pedals in the history of the electric guitar. The pedal was popularized by Stevie Ray Vaughan. It is widely used in genres as diverse as country, blues, and metal. Name an artist, and they have most likely used one, or are using one. The Tube Screamer has since spawned many clones and modified versions. Possible modifications include use of mismatched or different diodes. For example, a silicone and a germanium device, or more than two diodes in various arrangements, or modified tone circuits. It is also used by many metal guitarists before the lead channel of the high-gain amps to make distortion more focused and to cut the low end. The overdrive is produced using two silicone diodes in anti-parallel arrangement into the negative feedback circuit of an operational amplifier, or op-amp. A drive potentiometer in the feedback path provides variable gain. The original 4558 based circuit uses transistor buffers at both the input and the output to improve impedance matching. So the overdrive is produced using two silicone diodes in anti-parallel arrangement, going into the negative feedback circuit of an operational amplifier circuit. The drive potentiometer in the feedback path provides a variable gain. The original 4558 base circuit uses transistor buffers at both the input and the output to improve impedance matching. And a lot of people say that kind of preserves the input signal and the original dynamics of the signal, which would otherwise kind of get lost at the threshold of clipping. So it also avoids muddiness. It also really improves the clarity and responsiveness of the tone or the input signal as well. The Tube Screamer has a drive knob, a tone knob, and a level knob. The drive knob adjusts gain, the tone knob adjusts treble, and the level knob adjusts the output volume of the pedal. The pedal is used to try to mimic the sound of a vintage tube amplifier. The classic Tube Screamer sound includes a mid-hump, which means that the circuit accentuates frequencies between the bass and the treble ranges. Some guitarists prefer this sort of equalization, as it helps to keep their sound from getting lost in the overall mix of the band. Ibanez and its parent company, Hoshino, were known in the late 60s and early 70s mainly for their Fender, Gibson, and Rickenbacker knockoffs. But by the mid-70s, due to growing popularity, they also added effects pedals to the lineup. These pedals were actually manufactured by Nissin, a Japanese company that produced pickups for some Ibanez guitars. In a curious business arrangement, Nissin was allowed to market its own line of effects, which were identical to those it made for Ibanez, and they were sold under the Maxon brand name. By the late 70s, Nissin was developing the first Tube Screamer, the famed TS-808, that debuted in 1979, first designed by Susumu Tamura of Maxon. According to former Ibanez product manager John Lamas, when the Tube Screamer was created, Roland, a major Japanese competitor, was producing the Boss OD1 overdrive and already had a patent on solid-state asymmetrical clipping. This prompted Nissin to use symmetrical clipping in the Tube Screamer. The essence of a tube screamer's appeal are the subtly pleasing qualities it induces as it interacts with a tube amp. As you increase the amplitude of an input signal to overload a tube amp's preamp, it distorts the signal in a way that adds sustain, edge, and harmonic liveliness, while preserving the innate tonal characteristics of the guitar and amp, and without obscuring the player's dynamics. The TS-808 also differed from the OD1 in that it had a tone control and featured a common JRC4558D integrated circuit chip, or IC chip, and had a small rectangular foot switch. The Tube Screamer was really the first pedal I saw that had an IC in it, said Lomas. All the overdrives prior to the Tube Screamer were built around transistors. Lomas contends that the sweet vocal mid-range sound the TS-808 is known for has everything to do with that JRC4558D IC chip, which explains why Lomas and so many other overdrive aficionados prefer the sound of the original over other permutations of the pedal that have emerged over the years. Despite the popularity and holy grail status attained by the original TS-808, the Tube Screamer wasn't left alone. Perhaps the most popular of all Tube Screamers, the TS-9 replaced the TS-808 in 1982 with the introduction of the 9 series. The TS-9 was slightly brighter and a little less smooth sounding than the 808. The two were almost identical internally, and apart from the TS-9's expanded output, the foot switch got bigger too. The 9 series pedals had a foot switch that took up approximately a third of the pedal, a move clearly intended to compete with the easy-to-stomp design of Boss pedals. However, one drawback of the new Tube Screamer, according to Lomas, was that TS-9s were built with a somewhat random sourcing of parts, basically whatever was readily available at the time of manufacture. This resulted in TS-9s that varied widely in tone from batch to batch. The introduction of the TS-9 was not a magical moment by any stretch of the imagination, Lomas said. The public didn't give a rat's ass, not for the longest time. It caught on much later. I would say guys really started talking about it in the late 80s, and by 1990, it was really starting to roll along. Since there was little demand for the TS-9 when it came out, it was out of production by 1985. Ibanez then released a new series of stomp boxes, the Master Series, without a Tube Screamer in the lineup. Instead, it included the Super Tube STL, a 4-knob affair with a Tube Screamer circuit and a 2-band EQ. According to Analog Mike Piera, a noted stompbox expert whose company, Analog Man, began modifying Tube Screamers to original specs in the mid-90s, the STL was similar to the rare and very valuable European ST9 Super Tube Screamer that was never released in the US. Perhaps the resurrection of the TS-9 was inevitable, but Lomas contributed to its legacy by insisting on the 1992 reissue of the TS-9. He says when he took over product development in 1990, he immediately started pushing for a TS-9 reissue. Used 80s TS-9s were selling in stores for well over $250, when Ibanez itself was selling used units to dealers for $5. Lomas says management was wary. Nishin wanted to move toward digital technology and had no interest in going backward to the old analog products, which is somewhat ironic, Lomas notes, considering that Nishin is producing many of the older analog effects now. At the time, he says, they thought we were crazy. But money often talks when words fall short. After a prolonged browbeating, Nishan started to see the dollar signs that had convinced Lomas, and they authorized the reissue. Lomas recalls how he and his colleagues spent weeks buying every original TS9 they could get their hands on in order to ensure that the pending reissue was an exact replica. As they cracked open and examined the pedals, they found that almost every one had a Toshiba TA75558 IC chip rather than the JRC chip commonly found in TS808s. Since 90 to 95% of TS9s had that chip, says Lomas, that's what we decided to put back in it. He recalls with a hint of nostalgia the way the company boasted about the reissue when it finally came out, about how it was made in the same factory as the original. It was even built by the same middle-aged ladies. It was a dead, nuts-on copy, he said. Even the manual was identical, dated 1981 for authenticity. More than 5,000 sold within weeks of the release, and Ibanez estimates it has sold 10,000 to 12,000 TS9 reissues each year over the last decade. In the past decade, the Tube Screamer has continued to evolve with new additions such as the TS7 Tone Lock, the TS808 reissue, the TS9B, the first Tube Screamer for bass, and the 2010 introduction of the Tube Screamer amp, an ultra-portable, low-wattage amp available in head and combo versions that incorporates a selectable Tube Screamer circuit in its preamp. The Tube Screamer was developed as direct competition to the Boss OD1 distortion pedal, but over the years has grown into its own brand of pedal.